Voltaire's warning, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities," captures one of the most profound truths about human society. The essence of this statement lies in the recognition that belief is not merely a passive mental activity, but a potent force that can shape behavior, justify cruelty, and even normalize the unthinkable. Throughout history, political regimes, religious institutions, and ideological movements have wielded the power of absurd beliefs to mobilize masses, rationalize violence, and sustain oppressive systems. When absurdities are accepted as truth, the boundary between morality and immorality is blurred, opening the door for atrocities that otherwise would have been unimaginable. This thesis explores the philosophy embedded in Voltaire's words by examining the mechanisms through which absurd beliefs are implanted, the psychological vulnerability of human beings to manipulation, and the catastrophic consequences witnessed in historical and modern contexts. Ultimately, it argues that critical thinking and skepticism are not only intellectual virtues, but necessary defenses against the descent from absurd belief to atrocity. Absurdity as a foundation of atrocity. An absurdity is a claim that defies logic, evidence, or reason, yet is dressed up as unquestionable truth. Examples abound. The belief that certain races are inherently superior, that entire groups are less than human, or that suffering in this life guarantees eternal bliss in another. Once such absurdities are embraced, they create a moral framework that can justify virtually any action, no matter how cruel. Consider the medieval justification of witch hunts. The absurd belief that ordinary women could form pacts with the devil, fly on broomsticks, and cause plagues through sorcery led to centuries of persecution, torture, and executions. Here, the absurd was not only believed, but institutionalized. Because witches were framed as threats to the community's survival, burning them alive became an act of righteousness. The absurd belief produced a moral inversion. Murder was redefined as justice. Similarly, the Nazi ideology that Jews were subhuman parasites was an absurdity grounded in pseudoscience and conspiracy. Yet millions believed it. Once this belief was normalized, the industrial-scale extermination of human beings could be framed not as evil, but as a necessary cleansing. Atrocities of such magnitude were possible precisely because absurdities were elevated into collective truths. The psychology of believing absurdities. To understand why absurd beliefs are so powerful, we must examine human psychology. People are not purely rational beings. They are emotional, social, and often driven by fear, hope, and the need for belonging. 1. Authority and obedience. Studies like Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments reveal that individuals are remarkably willing to suspend their own moral judgment when commanded by authority figures. If the authority provides an absurd justification, for example, "These shocks are necessary for science," ordinary people can commit acts they would otherwise consider reprehensible. 2. Fear and insecurity. In times of crisis, humans seek explanations and scapegoats. Absurd beliefs provide simple answers to complex problems. During the Black Death, Jews were accused of poisoning wells, an absurdity that led to pogroms across Europe. Fear made people embrace nonsense, and that nonsense fueled atrocities. 3. In-group versus out-group dynamics. Absurd beliefs often strengthen group identity. Believing that we are chosen, pure, or destined gives people a sense of superiority, while dehumanizing them as evil or inferior removes moral obstacles to harming them. Propaganda consistently exploits this psychological vulnerability. 4. Cognitive dissonance. Once people commit small acts based on absurd beliefs, they rationalize them to reduce cognitive dissonance. Gradually, this rationalization escalates, making even greater atrocities possible. What begins as silent complicity ends as active participation. Historical illustrations. 1. Religious crusades and inquisitions. The belief that God commands violence has justified wars, massacres, and torture. Absurd promises of eternal rewards turned atrocity into piety. 2. Colonialism and slavery. European colonizers embraced the absurd idea that Africans and indigenous peoples were less than human. This dehumanization enabled the transatlantic slave trade and the brutal exploitation of colonies. Millions suffered and died, not because their oppressors were monsters in the literal sense, but because absurd ideologies made monstrous actions appear natural. 3. Totalitarian regimes. Stalin's purges were fueled by the absurd belief that countless innocent citizens were enemies of the people. Mao's Cultural Revolution unleashed violence based on the absurd claim that intellectuals were counter-revolutionaries. Millions perished because people accepted absurd definitions of loyalty and treason. The modern relevance. Voltaire's warning is not confined to history. In our modern world, absurdities continue to shape behavior, though often in subtler forms. Conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and extremist ideologies thrive in the digital age, spreading faster than ever before. Conspiracy theories. Beliefs that vaccines are government mind control tools, or that elections are systematically stolen can destabilize societies. These absurdities foster distrust, violence, and division. Extremist ideologies. Groups like ISIS persuade followers that suicide bombings are sacred acts. Here again, absurd beliefs translate into atrocities. Political propaganda. Leaders who demonize immigrants, minorities, or dissenters rely on absurd generalizations to justify harsh policies, discrimination, or even ethnic cleansing. The danger is not merely theoretical. It is visible in the rise of hate crimes, acts of terrorism, and violent polarization across nations. Critical thinking as the antidote. If absurd beliefs can lead to atrocities, then the most powerful defense is cultivating the ability to question, reason, and doubt. Critical thinking and skepticism are moral imperatives. 1. Education for reason. Schools must teach not only facts, but how to evaluate evidence, detect fallacies, and resist manipulation. The absence of such skills leaves individuals vulnerable to demagogues and conspiracy peddlers. 2. Freedom of expression and debate. Societies that allow open questioning of authority are less susceptible to absurdities. Censorship and dogma create fertile ground for irrational beliefs. 3. Moral responsibility. Individuals must recognize that believing is not a private act. Beliefs have consequences. Accepting absurdities makes one complicit in the atrocities they justify. Responsibility begins with intellectual integrity. Voltaire's insight encapsulates a timeless truth. The path from absurd belief to atrocity is tragically short. Whether in witch hunts, genocides, inquisitions, or modern extremist movements, the pattern is the same. Implant an absurdity, strip it of doubt, and unleash its destructive logic. Belief in nonsense is not harmless. It corrodes moral judgment, erodes empathy, and legitimizes cruelty. To resist this danger, humanity must commit itself to the discipline of skepticism, the courage to question, and the responsibility of reason. For if absurdities are the seeds of atrocities, then truth, critical thought, and compassion are the only antidotes. Voltaire's warning is not a relic of the Enlightenment. It is a living call to vigilance. Every generation must decide whether to surrender to the seduction of absurdity or to defend the fragile line between belief and brutality. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please like and share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.